invited to join the team just 6 weeks before the actual trip to Argentina and then to the mountain. So this is really a story about a woman named Laura Evans, who, when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was very advanced, she was a stage 3, between 3 and 4, went through bone marrow transplant, did everything to recover from the disease so that she could carry on her life. She was 40, I was 47. I think we were within a year of each other in age. She may have been 46, she might have been 48. Anyway, she had done a great deal of high altitude mountaineering and was determined to get back to the mountains after her recovery. She was good friends with Peter Whitaker of the Whitaker family. Lou Whitaker was the first U.S. person to summit Everest. So, and they have RMI, the Rainier Mountaineering Institute in Washington State on Mount Rainier. Anyway, she and Peter, after her recovery, put their heads together and decided they wanted to put together a team to climb a peak to raise awareness about breast cancer. And she did an incredible job. At the time, breast cancer was hardly on anyone's radar screen. It was very underfunded. AIDS was epidemic at that point, and all attention and all funding and all awareness was pretty much directed toward AIDS. So this and the founding of Komen that happened pretty much coincident with this did an enormous job of raising awareness of breast cancer in the public eye. At the time, there's a wonderful story. We ended up going, at the time, mammograms, detection for breast cancer wasn't covered by most insurance companies, was not covered by Medicare. After our climb, we were invited to the White House to when Bill Clinton made the announcement that Medicare would begin funding annual mammography for women Medicare and Medicaid eligible. So that was a pretty cool thing, to be there for that. But at the time, what was really remarkable to me was going to the War Memorial for Vietnam era veterans and seeing those 10,000 names on that giant sculpture. It was just completely overwhelming, especially since I am of that era. And then realizing that we had lost over 10,000 people whose names were there over close to a 10-year period of time to that war. And then recognizing that about 40,000 women were dying each year in the United States of breast cancer. So 4 times more deaths in 1 year compared to 10,000. Just kind of staggering. At the time, AIDS funding was 17 times greater than the funding of breast cancer research at the federal level. So just a context, breast cancer was not particularly on people's radar screen. This whole purpose of this was to raise awareness and also to raise funds for breast cancer research, which I think it has achieved. This is cool. I haven't looked at these slides in like maybe 15 years. So our DVD had a crack in it and couldn't, something happened. So little technical difficulties, but this is wonderful to have these slides. You want me to do this? Okay.
Do you want to have the lecture?
Am I in anyone's way? Yes. No? I have a good voice if I want to, so let me just do this without mic. That was, go back. I gave you the background on Expedition Inspiration. As I said, I joined the team 6 weeks before we went to the mountain. This is actually the summit team. The women chosen, there was a team of 17, and it was divided into 2 groups. There was a summit team of 6 of us, and then a support team of 11. The support team of 11 were intended to get to base camp and wait there We went in a week earlier, went to base camp, established base camp, and then started higher up the mountain. They came in behind us. We were at 16,000 when they arrived at base camp. So basically, our two teams didn't come together until we had already been to the summit and returned. So I could introduce each of those people, but let's pass on that. We started our climb in a little town called Puente del Inca. It's in Argentina at about 8,000 feet. It's the launch point for climbs on Aconcagua from the side of the mountain. People climb from both the Argentinian side predominantly, and a few will climb from the Chilean side. We did not. This is the summit team plus our support. This was a well-supported team. JanSport, the company, had stepped up to be the corporate sponsor and absolutely were in 100%. To do that, we had obviously a great guide support. We also had a videographer, Steve Martz, and a photographer, Jimmy Kay, who are responsible for all these great slides. Okay. Let's do this, if I can. Good. Okay, so starting up, I would comment that it was beautiful weather when we got to Puente del Inca. It was January, the middle of the Argentinian summer, and we did have mule support. We were hearing that there had been some very bad weather up high on the mountain, but it wasn't affecting us lower down. It was a little windy, but that was the extent of it. This was our first camp. You can see some prayer flags. One of the ways we raised money for the climb was to have prayer flags for people who donated. And so we had the names of literally hundreds and hundreds of people that we carried with us on this journey. Setting up camp. I'm going to run through these fairly quickly. This was the first opportunity for us to actually see the peak. Aconcagua is considered kind of a pile of stones. Typically does not have quite this much snow on it. It does have some major glaciers, but this season had been a very, very snowy season, which actually I think worked out for the better. We had some difficult stream crossings. There was there was fairly high water. Unfortunately, that's a mule you're seeing in addition to rock. So it was quite a climb. Some of these photographs kind of flatten things out a bit, but a steep ascent to 14,000. This is.
So Nancy, in one of your earlier slides, it seemed like there was a beard in silhouette. So were all the team members women, or was it?
All the team members were women. We did have male guides. And Paul Delory, was there as a CEO of JanSport, as well as a physician, our team doc, who was a breast surgeon. Okay, this is our camp at 14. We set up our camp there. We actually built the first outhouse they'd ever had for slough. They'd ever had at 14,000. People had just been using big boulders. So we had a couple of extra days there to acclimatize. And Pete Whitaker is kind of a slave master. He made us set up a proper bathroom. And we also did a dance floor with the expectation we might be successful and would want to party. That's the dance floor under excavation. Oh, let me go back. That's Pete Whitaker right there. And then members of various guides, as well as team members.
Were you all cancer survivors?
All the team members were cancer survivors, yes. And we ranged in age from, I think it was 65 to 21 or 2. A young woman who had had breast surgery as a teenager, she was about 18, and when they did the surgery, which was somewhat, it wasn't medically necessary, they discovered that she had some breast cancer tissue. And so she, at that point, had a bilateral mastectomy. I think she was 18 at the time. We had a ceremony at 14,000 where we each shared things things we brought on the climb with us. Each of us had been given various mementos that people wanted us to carry up to share with the mountain and to hopefully bring back the good spirit from this expedition. So next to me is our team doctor, Bud Alpert. That's Vicki Boriak. She was my tent mate. We're still dear, dear friends. She's reading a giant silk prayer flag that she had, members of her community had all signed it. She's in Santa Cruz, California, and had hundreds of signatures, all people who had supported her in her recovery from breast cancer, but also supported the climb. And this is our camp. We're preparing our camp at 16,000. At this point, we've heard that there's going to be some pretty high winds and some weather coming in. So we were setting up camp, putting some stone walls up to protect our tents from what we anticipated. The mountain is only 90 miles from the Pacific Ocean by air. So one of the challenges on this peak is that when the storms come in, they carry a great deal of moisture with them from the Pacific Ocean. And most of the prevailing winds obviously are from the west. So we had gotten warning that we could easily see some big weather, which we did. We spent 2 days pretty much buttoned down in our tents. It was cold. At this point, it is cold. It's below zero at night and, 20s probably in the daytime. We are in contact with the support team at that point. They were just arriving at 14,000 and found all the tents and things that we had left behind. We'd worked so hard to prepare, flattened by the winds. So they had a lot of work to do to recover that camp for all of us. That's the view from my tent, the second or I guess it's probably the second morning. It was the morning after the storm. And we were ready to head up to 19,000 at that point in time. In mountaineering, typically you do double carries. You have to take so much in the way of fuel and ropes and equipment and food and all that kind of stuff that you carry things that you don't need immediately up, all that you possibly can, and then go back to your prior camp and then carry your tents and the essentials. The second day. It has two purposes. One, you can get a lot of gear up the mountain that way. The second is that you're acclimatizing. You're working high and sleeping lower than you worked, which is very, very helpful for getting acclimatized to the higher altitudes.
So Nancy, what was your pack weight?
When we did a carry up, I was probably carrying 55 pounds. And that was true for both days. When we went for our summit bid, we were probably carrying 25 or 30. It was a steep haul. Huh? It was kind of fun to see these. We were at 19 and pretty excited that we had gotten that far up the mountain. At that point in time, the winds were high, the temperatures were low, but the weather was clear. And Pete was saying, if we get a weather window the following day. Now, this is after 2 days of carrying heavy equipment up to 19, we would go for a summit bid. And it was nice the next day, and we are partway up the mountain at that point. We started, I think we woke up at 3 a.m. It was about 25 below zero that morning. It was cold. I was sleeping. It was my turn to sleep with the batteries for the video equipment. So my sleeping bag had these big, heavy batteries in the bottom of it, and me. So it had not been a great night's sleep the night before. But this, I think, was a morning break where we stopped and fueled up a little bit, water and food. That's our camp at 19. I'm a little out of order here. This is our night, and now we're starting up the mountain. So
there are 6 of you, and how many guys were with you on that last trip?
I think we had 5 guides, and then we also had our team doc with us. So I think there were 6 others. There were 12 of us that began the ascent that day, if I'm not mistaken. This is when my teammate Vicky Boriak had to turn around. We were at what we did was we circumvented the mountain, went from 19 to about 21,000. Then we were on a kind of non-traditional route. It's called the Polish Traverse. We came up the backside of the mountain and then circumvented the mountain, hooked up with the traditional route for climbing the peak, and from 21 to almost 23, went up the caldera on that normal route. At about 21, Vicki was just really lagging, and it was clear that she wasn't going to be able to make the last 2,000. So I got her prayer flag, that big giant silk flag, and we continued on. People have said Aconcagua is a walk in the park. And I have said many times, try walking at 19, 20, 21,000 feet. You are taking 2 or 3 breaths for every step that you take. So this is nearing the summit. As you can see, the Andes are immense and just some of the most magnificent mountains. The views were unbelievable from basically the shoulders. There we are starting up the Canaleta. And the Canaleta is just a steep, I don't know what the degrees are, boulder field that the final ascent is a combination of walking but also bouldering up the final distances. And here we are approaching the summit. And the summit is marked with that beautiful flag. This was actually, I can get teary on this one. I have such admiration for this woman, Laura Evans, who, despite her breast cancer, chose to make a difference. She only lived about 5 years after this climb. And inspired not just this team of 17, but inspired basically hundreds of thousands of people to recognize the importance of addressing the breast cancer issue. She started a nonprofit. She started a research symposium that helped to move some really early stage breast cancer to kind of up the funding ladder so it could be pursued. It resulted in some of the early breakthroughs in breast cancer detection and also treatments. And here we are on the top. You can recognize me by my white hair, and I was in my 40s, very white. There we are calling the base camp and letting them know we were at the top. So the people in this picture are Pete Whitaker, Laura Evans, me, and Claudia Berryman Schaefer.
Which summit was that? Was that the north or the south summit?
Aconcagua basically has one summit. If you're thinking of Elbrus, which has two summits. And no, it has one. One big rock summit. And that's the base camp team responding. That's Pete Whitaker's wife at the time. And here we are looking at the mountain. I'm not sure why that photograph's there, except it's a beauty of the mountain itself. When we came back down, we had, I think this is as we're returning. We came back down, it was a 15-hour climb. It was one of the hardest things I've done. I had at that point climbed Mount Rainier, which is about 14,000. It was pretty strong, it was a great experience. Climbed Elbrus, it's 18.5, and found that a bit more challenging, but did fairly well on that climb. But this mountain is 22,841 feet, so a big step up from anything I had done before. It was both physically challenging, but also, I've got to say, I had to dig deeply to get there. So this is coming back, and I think this is at, doesn't look like our base camp, but it might have been. We had obviously a major celebration when we got back. As I said, I haven't looked at these slides in a long time. I don't know what. This is a different expedition. This was on Denali. So that's the end of my slides.
So Nancy, was it a pretty worn trail? I mean, did you have no trouble following the route to get up to the top of the summit?
We were grateful to be with guides. It was a fairly straightforward climb up to 14. After 14, not quite as clear. From 19 on, we really needed our guides, and bless them, they put wands in through a couple of the sections that were least clear, because coming off the mountain, weather did come in. We were in a whiteout much of the way down the mountain, and so it was a good thing we were all on rope, so that, and that the wands were placed clearly enough and frequently enough that that the team could continuously find the path back down to our base camp.
When you were up that high, did you notice in your brain what it felt like?
So Janet's question is, do you feel the altitude mentally? And absolutely. At one point, we were taking a quick break. We were probably at 21.5, maybe even at 22 by then. And we're sitting there having some water, trying to get some calories in ourselves. And I'm thinking about how nice it's going to feel to have a pedicure when I get down. So am I having some wackadoodle moments? Yes, I was. But at the time, it seemed like a natural thing to be thinking about. So, what else?
What did you have to do to prepare? How long did it take you to get in shape?
Well, fortunately, I was pretty active at that time, and I was helping, and I had learned about this climb. I had applied and been declined. And so I had offered to help with fundraising and to help a couple of the local team members train for the climb, because I had just, I was happy to help them. So we did a lot of climbing up Mount Tamalpais. I was living in Marin County at the time, and Mount Tam was a great place to get some fairly good, steep elevations. And in addition to that, we would carry heavy packs. I would put 50 pounds of cat litter in my pack and head up the Dipsy Stairs, if you know the Dipsy Stairs. Anyway, so we all did as much as we could to prepare for it. Fortunately, I had done that, and fortunately, I had climbed Elbrus in August the year before, '94. That's a backstory. It was probably how I got on the team. But anyway, so I was in pretty good shape. I will tell you, though, that last 6 weeks, I was focused. Yes?
Hey, Nance, tell us a little bit about how much money you raised and fun stories about that.
That is a prepped question. She asked me that yesterday in the car as we were driving back from Seattle. We had been in Mexico together for 2 weeks. Anyway, after the climb, we had a lot of opportunity to do fundraising and awareness building for breast cancer. It lasted for a year to 18 months of coverage in various magazines and TV interviews and all kinds of things, including our visit to Washington, D.C. I was asked to present at the California Governor's Conference for Women shortly after we had returned from D.C. And I showed a little clip of the film and talked about, having met with various congressional committees and people. We spent an entire afternoon with Sandra Day O'Connor. She was fabulous. I ended up giving her my team jacket so that she could be an honorary member of our expedition. And she was her son had just climbed Aconcagua a year or so before, so she was very aware of the mountain. Anyway, got back, was at this conference. The woman who was the keynote speaker was Undersecretary of Labor Lynn someone, and I can't think of her last name, but she worked for Bob Reich at the time. And I made my little pitch. I talked about being at the War Memorial and kind of this juxtaposition of AIDS deaths versus breast cancer deaths. About 10,000 people a year were dying of AIDS, about 40,000 were dying of breast cancer. AIDS was getting, and it needed it, 17 times more funding as breast cancer. The AIDS effort absolutely needed that funding, and it's a blessing that occurred and that we were able to find effective treatments for that disease. But breast cancer was not receiving any funding and obviously needed further funding to make similar kinds of strides. It actually, some of the AIDS research helped to inform some of the future technologies that made a big difference in breast cancer. So anyway, I made my little presentation. Lynn was impressed and said, everybody, you have bread baskets on your table. Pull that bread out. I want to see every woman here put a donation in that basket, $20 per person. Everybody can afford it. And somebody counted the money as quickly as it came in, and one of the, I think it was, I want to say it was Farmers Insurance, an executive from Farmers Insurance who was also attending stepped up and said, I think we were at $32,000 at that point. It was a couple hundred people. And she stepped up and said, we're making it 40, we're in. And her company put in the last 8,000 to round it up to 40,000. It was pretty exciting moment. I must admit, a few tear balls from me. What else? Rich?
Nancy, could you outline kind of you've talked a little bit about previous climbs, but what was kind of your climbing history? When did you start, and how much climbing did you do? Did other people on your team have a climbing background?
Members of the base camp team, the 11 members of our team who were targeted just to go to the base camp at 14,000, had some backpacking experience, things of that nature, but not much mountaineering experience. I was the least experienced on the summit team, probably by a margin. I had done a lot of backpacking and had decided about 2 years prior that I was interested in understanding how to use a rope, the importance of roping on a team, and decided to sign up for a week-long mountaineering class on Rainier. And I did it, and I loved it. We did ice climbing. We learned to travel on rope. We learned ice axe arrest, all the skills you need for climbing mountains, and we climbed Rainier. when I was declined on this climb, my husband wasn't willing to get over it. I was willing to help others, but he was not happy. He discovered that Laura Evans was going to be climbing Mount Elbrus in August of '94 as a training climb. And so he did a little research and discovered there was one place left in that trip. And I came home from work one afternoon and discovered I had a plane ticket. I had a ticket to be a part of that team, and I had a visa to get into Russia. So he had been a busy boy. Anyway, he was a great, great support, obviously, for me on that climb. On Elbrus, we had a good climb for the most part. We had a number of people who weren't able to get to the summit, but those of us who we got up, we had a good climb, we're starting down, and one of the members on my rope team, there were three ropes, I believe, right below me fell and called falling. We had been trained. I immediately went into an ISACS arrest and just happened to get my ISACS in before the guide who was leading our team, which was a good thing. He came back, checked on me, got me in a really good, secure position to hold the rope. Everybody else is, down and pulling, because it was very steep at that place. And he was able then to go back and get them organized and get their gear in place, and then return, and the team could continue. So I got a little bit of, I was an inexperienced climber, so I got some good cred for having arrested our team on that climb. And I think that was probably the turning point when we got back to Priute Hut on Elbrus, which is no longer there, it's burned. Laura did tell me that, despite good performance on that climb, it was too late for me to join the expedition. But then she called about 4 weeks later and said, hey, we've changed our mind. Do you think you could join our summit team? So it was a very happy story for me.
Did you get your pedicure?
I had some of the worst blisters I've ever had. I think I wore flip-flops for about 3 weeks after that climb. I couldn't let anyone touch my feet. Good question. Yeah, John.
How long was it from you finished treatments and you were deemed cancer-free till you did the climb?
It was exactly 1 year. I had just finished radiation treatment the beginning of February of '94. So, other questions?
The climb took place in February.
We started in January. It took us about 16 days to make it to our summit day. And then, so it was February 4th, 30 years ago today.
And Nancy, my memories get kind of gray too. 30 years ago, I was watching you on, was it Discovery Channel? Was it PBS? Who did the special on that?
It was, well, we're looking for it. We intended to show that video, and something happened and the DVD got broken. And so we went to put it in and it was not gonna. Anyway, it was Bill Curtis. He still does, what is it? Wait.
Yeah.
Don't tell me. Bill Curtis did a series of TV programs called Young Explorers, and we were they were primarily about science and science breakthroughs, but he had a producer working with him, Jeannie Morris, who wanted to see this expedition documented and convinced him he should fund a documentary of our climb. It's a good film. We'll get a copy at some point.
Have you looked for it on YouTube?
We did.
Oh, yeah.
Just up there.
I thought everything was there.
It's just about, but not quite.
Well, you were my idol back then, and it was again a quarter of a century.
Oh, Jeff.
So
Thank you.
Did you climb that mountain?
I have not climbed that mountain, no.
But how high?
Any other climb?
Seriously, I have to her now.
Yeah, Dave Jensen's been in the Andes and climbed high. I don't know what peaks you've climbed.
20,000 was the most, so and that was hard.
It is hard. Yeah. So, altitude is a very funny thing. People can be extraordinarily strong and not do well at altitude. I was definitely a dark horse, partly because I'm not a really big person, but I was strong. I acclimatize well, and that was a real godsend. Since then, I've climbed quite a bit at high altitudes, and I tend to do well. Other people, it's physiology, it's how your body responds to that absence of air pressure. It does change how your body is functioning, for sure.
So we have the celebratory cake over there.
I can't believe you did that. That was really, really sweet. Thank you.
And you can continue the conversations. However, I really, Dave and Jeff, let's get together and do some kind of a mountain climbing day here and let people share experiences. And we'll get when Uncle Bob's here. Okay.
So I want to say thank you to all of you for coming and helping me celebrate what is a very important day for me, because none of my other team members are here. We're hoping to get together in June with those of us who are able. But yeah, so it was an important day to celebrate in some way, and I so appreciate your being here. I'd also ask, okay, here's the public service announcement. Josephi Center is a nonprofit. We survive with very generous donations from many great foundations, but we also depend enormously on, that doesn't begin to cover our costs, and we depend enormously on your contributions. So if you would like to make a little gift, this is a free presentation.
It's still going, right?
Expedition Inspiration is still going, yes. It's had its ups and downs, but it has continued to provide this annual medical symposium and to award a young researcher award to someone doing really breakthrough, cutting-edge research, bench research. Those individuals are passionate about their work, and they are not particularly, those that have the great breakthroughs make a ton of money, but those that are doing the hard work at the bench, thinking of the new ideas, really doing that breakthrough, at that point in their careers, they are not very well funded. So we do a special award for those people.
So I'm not going to ask you, ladies, or the men for that matter, to relate your own histories with breast cancer, but I've told Nancy that my mother had a radical mastectomy in
Early.
She was in her 50s and passed away when she was 70, but that was way before.
Even when I was diagnosed in the early 90s, 93, the mortality rate from breast cancer was about 50%.
Wow.
Today, the mortality rate from breast cancer is someplace closer to 10%, 10 to 15%. There have been amazing, wonderful strides. As I said, some of the research in AIDS has informed some of the research in breast cancer, which has informed other researches, like for prostate cancer and a number of other. They're finding relationships among cancers. They're also obviously doing a huge amount of genetic research that has helped move all of this forward. But my pitch was for Josephi Center. It is the opportunity to bring community together, is a very important part of our mission overall. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I almost think that was better, getting more talk out of you than we would have with the movie.
That was my strategy, Brett.